Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the April 7th, 2022 Sustainability Commission meeting. To help slow the transmission, oh, are we still reading that? No, we're not reading that anymore. Awesome. Okay, shall we just move on to roll call then?
Commissioner Pinkerton? Commissioner Khanjan?
Here.
Commissioner Kartunyan?
Here.
Vice Chair Werner?
Here.
Chair Bartusov?
Here.
Thank you. Ex officio Gang?
Here.
Ex officio Prado?
Here.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, 1B, 1A, Pledge of Allegiance. I apologize. I'm going to conduct the roll call one more time because the mics were off for commissioners and ex officios. So we have it on the record. Could you please turn on your mics? Thank you. Commissioner Pinkerton, Commissioner Khanjan,
Present.
Commissioner Kartunyan,
Present.
Vice Chair Werner,
Present.
Chair Bartusov,
Yes.
ex officio Gang,
Here.
ex officio Prado.
Here.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, 1B, the agenda for April 7, 2022 meeting of the Sustainability Commission was posted on April 1st, 2022 on the bulletin board outside the City Hall. Item number 2, approval of minutes. 2A, approval of the minutes of the Commission regular meeting held on March 3, 2022. May I have a motion and second to approve the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
Minutes approved as submitted. Item number 3, board member and staff comments.
Thank you. Do we have any staff comments?
Good evening, Chairperson Bartusov, Vice Chairperson Werner, and Commissioners. We have two staff comments. The first one is a request to bring item 6A forward to follow oral communications. And then the second staff comment is at the next meeting of the May 5th Sustainability Commission meeting, we'll be electing a new chair and a new vice chair. So we just want to make sure that the agenda will be itemized for the next meeting. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Any comments from commissioners?
I have no objection to the changing of the agenda.
Oh, yes, and yeah, thank you for that. Same. Okay, any other comments? Hearing none, let's move on to, so we'll move to 6A then.
6A, report information, community development, policy presentation.
Oh, I had a comment. Board member
Oh, do
Okay.
you have a comment?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sorry, let's hear Randy.
Oh, yes. On Tuesday, I attended the passing of the gavel from former Mayor Devine to new Mayor Artie Kasakian, a first-time mayor, and both mayors, incoming and outgoing, gave a shout out to the Sustainability Commission and mentioned it as one of the highlights of Mayor Devine's term. And they also mentioned that and reaffirmed their commitment to sustainable issues here in Glendale. And we look forward to working with our new mayor, Kasakian, and I'm excited about the future of Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to 6A.
Item 6A, under reports and informations, community development, policy presentation.
Chairperson Bartusov and Sustainability Commissioners. So this is a second presentation given to the Commission from Community Development. This presentation will be focused on policy discussion. This will be the final presentation, departmental presentation given to the Commissioners. The Commissioners have had presentations from all of the departments within the city in anticipation of the Commission developing a work plan. I believe Mr. Peter Zovak will be doing the presentation, or starting the presentation at least, on behalf of Community Development.
Correct. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Peter Zovak. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Development. Tonight we have a number of staff from the Community Development Department to talk about some of the program highlights that we have within the department in the areas of housing, planning, building, and safety, and then answer any questions that you might have. So we're going to have a rotation of staff coming up and walking you through this PowerPoint presentation. I'll kick it off with just on the first slide. One of the areas that I supervise is the affordable housing development of projects and programs. And so we were just touching base on our largest program that we provide in the area of affordable housing for renters, and that's the Section 8 program. And what that does is provide rental subsidies for qualified households to live in market rate units within Glendale, and these are units of their own choosing. So what you'll hear tonight is a discussion about how the city sponsors and develops affordable housing projects in which we work with nonprofit developers, and every unit is an affordable unit restricted for 30, 50, 60, 70 years. The Section 8 program, though, is a program that born on the federal level with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, back in 1978. And their intent was to develop affordable housing, but do it in a way that didn't concentrate those recipients in a particular building that was maybe managed by a government entity. And then so every qualifying very low-income household is issued a voucher. And with it, the city, on behalf of HUD, will pay up to 70% of a rent of a unit, and then the tenant pays the remaining 30% share. And this is a program that allows tenants to have a choice in their housing. So they're able to take that voucher and then go out and secure a unit just like anyone else will, any other renter would. Talk with the landlord, ask them if they'd participate in the Section 8 program with the city, and then contract up. And then from that point on, we're paying a heavy portion of that monthly rent on behalf of HUD, and the tenant paying the remaining portion. So that program annually, it's about a $50 million program. It's made up of a number of different vouchers that we receive. The city of Glendale receives just under 1,600 vouchers allocated to us that we can use as we choose. Then we have about 225 special population vouchers that they give, and those don't add to our regular allocation of vouchers. It's a temporary program that they'll scale back after a number of years in implementation. This 225 special population voucher is for households that are coming out of homelessness. So it's an emergency housing situation. So someone going through our continuum of care down at our Essentia Center for processing and qualifying through the homeless center there would then get a referral to our office. We then qualify them, issue them a voucher, and then with a case manager out there trying to secure a unit with the landlord. There are no sustainability requirements or funding required or provided by HUD. HUD is intent on trying to get these vouchers out, active, leased up, and implemented into communities as quickly as possible. There are some guidelines that they require for these units to pass, and every unit is inspected by a city housing inspector before we actually sign contracts with the landlord. And they're looking for very basic things such as smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and then looking at the regular code issues related to the habitability of the unit. Are the plugs working? Is there hot water? Is there heat? Are all the windows in place, functioning, and things like that? And so that program has been around since 1978 and has grown both in numbers and in budget to where, again, it's $50 million annually. And it's a very important program because it's something that is readily available. And, you know, I see that I didn't mention the portable voucher. So I mentioned earlier that HUD wants these individuals to have a choice in their housing. So that's not only a choice of living in the community that issues the voucher. In this particular case, a Glendale resident would qualify, be issued a voucher, and they would contract in Glendale, but allows then people to what they call port out to other cities, other agencies. And so in Glendale's case, we have a little over 1,200 vouchers that are issued in other cities. And then that household tells that agency, I don't want to live here. I want to move to another city. And as long as that other city has a housing agency, then we administer it on their behalf. And we have just over 1,200, which is a pretty high number in California in terms of an agency having that high of ports, almost as high as our regular vouchers. And the majority of them come from the city of LA, with a small number coming from the county as well.
I have a question on that. So I assume the landlords or building owners need to opt in to the program, right? So have you had a problem getting more participation on the part of the property owners, given that rentals are, fairly low vacancies?
Yeah, good question. And not only is there a low vacancy rate historically in Glendale, but the Section 8 program is not necessarily as market rate in the rents that we could pay for as the landlords expect. So there is a bit of a discount that a landlord would have to take in renting to a Section 8 tenant. That's only because we're told we have 1,592 vouchers. And then we're told by HUD, here's your budget. And it's not necessarily a budget that would support a full 1,592. So you have to sit and manipulate, well, how do we, what level should we set our rents that we can help as many people as possible? We can set our rents at a level that, a landlord would say, hey, you guys pay that much? That's great, I'll take you. And then instead of assisting 1,592, we might only be able to assist 1,100 households because that gap is so huge and will take all our budget. So we have to really be careful in the limits that we set. And at times in the past, it's been a deterrent, someone going out there and saying, well, you know what, I'd love to participate in the Section 8 program, but your rents are a little bit lower than what I can get on the market. So we've done things over the time where we've come up with incentive programs where if it's a brand new landlord to the Section 8 program, we might give them a $3,000 incentive. Other things that we can do, there's, as I mentioned, there's a time that we have to come out and do an inspection as well. And so landlords will say, well, if you're a market rate tenant, we'd sign a lease today. But you're telling me an inspector has to come out within the next 2 weeks and look at my unit. That's 2 weeks I don't have the unit being paid for and all that. So we can pay for that downtime as well to bridge that gap and try and make a Section 8 tenant as competitive as a market rate tenant would be for a unit. But it has been a challenge. Although I would say that during the COVID pandemic, we were considered a product that was desirable. We didn't miss one rent payment during the COVID pandemic to our landlords, right? And so everything you're hearing, what we found is that we had landlords then coming back to us saying, hey, the Section 8 program, you guys are pretty good. Let's take a look at that. So they were willing to take a discount when the times were difficult for them as well. So it's a balancing act that we have to do and go through.
You mentioned that we have 1592 voucher budget, but based on the budgetary constraints, you may be serving less number. Exactly. What is the actual number that's being served in Glendale? As
of April 1st, our report came out and said we're about 1492, okay. So just under 100, at 100 below, and we're trying to quickly fill that gap. And keep in mind, though, even though we do have some tenants that have been on the program for a very long period of time, a majority of our program is made up of seniors. And so unfortunately we see, and the seniors, older seniors, not brand new seniors at 62 and all that. We have some very older seniors that are in the program. And unfortunately, every month we have turnover. And it's not that they're saying, I'm giving up my Section 8 voucher, I'm good. It's unfortunately they're passing or no longer to be able to live independently in the unit. And then we can't pay for that, any type of long-term care. Okay. And then I'll just mention, the last time that the Section 8 waiting list was open was in 2001, and we had 12,000 households apply. So here it is, 21 years later, and we still have 1,760 on the waiting list that have been waiting as well. So it's been a challenge. And so with that, then, that's our largest housing program. And then Mike Fortney, who's our principal project manager, is going to talk about the affordable housing projects that we develop and what the activity is like now.
Good afternoon. Commissioners, I guess it's evening, isn't it? 5:36. I'm Mike Fortney. I'm the Principal Housing Project Manager at the city. Let me see if this works. Nope. All right, now the fun stuff. So my job is to develop affordable housing in the city. Over there, it says 10 years, 203 units produced. In 15 years, in the last 15 years, we've actually produced closer to 600. We had a lull in 2012 when redevelopment went away. That was 85, 90% of our money. So we stepped down our production in affordable housing for a few years, but 200 units over the last 10 years, almost 600 units though over the last 15 years. And then we have 507 rounds in, or 507 units, sorry, in development right now. We've also just in the last 18 months, 24 months, we've added 1,475 workforce housing units to our portfolio in 5 different buildings. And I can talk a little bit more about each. First project is 515 Pioneer Drive. This was kind of like a dream for, this is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So we acquired this property from AT&T. It's a 2.8 acre site. Pretty tough to come by in the city of Glendale. It's a site that big that's that underdeveloped. But yeah, AT&T had been out there since like 50, 60 years. So we bought it from them, 12.2 million plus another 900,000 for relocation. It's actually zoned for a maximum of 40 units. We're going to build 340 units, so we gave ourselves a 750% density bonus. Yeah, that's pretty unheard of. But we're being aggressive as possible to try to provide as many affordable units as we can. So out of the 340 units, 337 are targeting either extremely low or low income. Just extremely low is 30% area median income. Low can go upwards of 80% of area median income. It's going to serve seniors and small families. Small family defined as members of 5, a household of 5 or less, so a 2-bedroom or less. We'll have photovoltaic install on the roof. That's pretty tough to see, but they're in the image there. Every square inch that we could clear up on the roof will be covered in photovoltaics. We're also shooting all electric on this project. And we are committed to hitting LEED Gold standards for this one. The last project that the developer we partnered with on this one is the last project we built. That was Vista Grande. We hit LEED Gold on that one. We actually targeted LEED Silver, but wound up with gold. We found a little wiggle room in there. Citrus Crossing. Actually, I found this site on accident. I was talking to a broker on a site, 1239 South Glendale, Glendale Studios. That one was a little too rich for us, but he had this site in mind too. It's the Tobin World site. So what you're seeing there is the single-story structure Tobin World used to use for classrooms and whatnot, and the parking lot where they park their buses. So that half of the site, we're going to develop 127 units of senior, and that's going to target extremely low to low income also. We know the affordability on this one now at 72 years. All of my deals, the minimum affordability has to be 55 years. But we extend that out because of the financing. And so we do this analysis to determine how many years we have to keep it affordable and keep the public subsidy actual loans versus grants. So the magic number on this one was 72 years. We've done it up to 75 years. So I haven't determined what that's going to be yet on Pioneer or the next project I'm going to talk about. It says solar ready, but we're shooting for solar install. If the budget holds, we'll actually have photovoltaic on the roofs where we can. There are rooftop decks on this because this is packed on. This is 150 dwelling units to the acre. This is a very dense project. So we don't have a lot of open space on the ground. So we had to go to the roof. So that's going to cut into our ability to provide photovoltaic, but to the extent we can, we will. And we're shooting for LEED Platinum on this one. This will be the first one I've done that's platinum. Harrowmore Village.
Just real quick, are there several projects that you're going to go through? I'm just curious how many you have.
No, this is it. This one right
okay.
here. Yeah.
Can you talk to us about what the parking requirements are for affordable housing developments here? maybe use this one as an example and why we have those parking requirements if they're different from normal development.
Yeah, so on a typical density bonus project, you can get away with 1 space per 1 bedroom, 2 spaces per 2 and 3 bedroom. But if you're 100% affordable and you're within half mile of mass transit, you can go to half a stall per unit. It's hard to say that, right? And a couple of these projects did qualify for that. In fact, all 3 of them did. But because they did qualify for half, doesn't mean we're gonna provide that smaller parking. We're actually gonna provide a little bit more. Our senior projects, I found the good ratio is about 0.65 to 0.75 stalls per unit, which is about what we're hitting, I believe, on Pioneer. And then I think we're closer to 0.5 to 0.65 on these sites. This particular project, its parking is actually going to be provided next door at the 900 site. This is a historic building. We're not tearing it down. We're adaptively reusing it and historically preserving the building. We are going to add a small new structure on the site because there's a big courtyard. So we had to get the parking for this one next door at 900. So, but yeah, that's typical. 0.65 to 0.75, that's a pretty good ratio for senior affordable.
And for these projects, are we including any EV chargers in the garages?
Yes. I can't remember how many offhand. I want to say 4 on the 900 East Broadway site and 6 on the Pioneer site, although there might be more in the Pioneer site. Yeah, we do have those.
Is there a requirement that we're imposing on EV chargers in new buildings, whether it's affordable housing or not? I don't know if you want to take that question now or if it's part of a discussion later.
I can let planning, when they get up here, talk about, from a planning perspective or building and safety, what might be in the code.
Sure.
But in terms of housing, it's not a written policy of ours. But when we do, I'll give you an example. On all 3 of these projects, once I've acquired these sites, I'll generate an RFQ or an RFP. I'll issue it out to the community, for the affordable housing community. And then I'll get upwards of 18 different developers competing for each of those sites. It's a process. But part of the process of who I'm going to select is, a whole criteria of evaluation, how we evaluate the projects. Financing being, huge, targeting affordability, but always sustainability is part of that also. So it's factored in terms of who gets the award. And it's a balance of a lot of different things, including sustainability.
But you could, in theory, have that RFP be so prescriptive to say that we want a project that's going to have X percentage of EV chargeable stalls.
Yeah.
So that is possible as a policy pursuit, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And when you're talking about a handful of stalls in the structure, that's probably not such a big issue. I wouldn't want to go in an RFQ, RFP to say, be adamant that you have to have 100% photovoltaic, just because these projects are all publicly funded. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of factors that go into the financing. Mm-hmm. So whenever possible, we want to hit it. Like, we didn't anticipate going photovoltaic on this project, but we got AHP dollars, $25,000 a unit that we weren't anticipating. Now I think we can afford it, and if we can afford it, and there's another pressing matters, we're going to put it on there. So that's my only reservation would be to absolutely mandate something that's really expensive. But 4, 5, 6 stalls, that's not a big deal, and it is something we could absolutely do.
In terms of EV charging, one recommendation, even if you don't mandate that EV chargers be installed, having the conduits there available 10 years, 20 years from now, it would be extremely helpful. Because what I've found, buildings that were built in the even 90s, in order to add EV charging, you have to do trenching or add conduits all over the garage. So having the conduits available underground for use in the future would make a huge difference years from now.
And I agree with you 100%. I would say it's not a written policy, but it's kind of an unwritten policy that at a minimum, all the projects will be wired for it. And that includes rooftop photovoltaic.
Perfect, thank you.
And then I've got workforce housing on there because, we just added 1,475 units to the portfolio in just a very short amount of time. It's 5 separate buildings. We didn't build any of them. They were already built. So they're newer buildings. I really don't know what level. I don't know that any of them actually are LEED certified. Just hitting Title 24 in California means you're pretty green anyway, but I really can't speak too much of those, but we wanted to talk about them and just bring it up for conversation if you wanted. But the 1,435 units, I think we have the most now in the state of California by a fairly good number. We were able to restrict 140 of those units, 1,475, to 80% and 50% area median income, which is unusual because these usually just target 80 to 120% AMI. So that we wanted to just mention that. That's it on my part, unless there's questions for me on affordable housing development.
I had a question. When you say conversion of existing market rate units to affordable, so what does that look like? So a housing or the state or like somebody buys it from the owner and then just lowers the rent, or how exactly? Because I thought I've been thinking for a while that's a way to provide immediate housing. Is a lot of these projects they're like, oh great, and in 2 or 3 years someone will move in, but what about the people who are struggling today? And so I had heard that somewhere like on Orange Street or something, a big property was purchased and so on, and I just thought that just seems like a really expedient way to spend all those funds that have been set aside for affordable housing that they're having trouble spending fast enough. So I just wondered how that actually works.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. So the way it works is pretty interesting. There's a couple of joint powers authorities that have been created. Well, one is a spinoff, but basically they just got created in the last 3 years. One's Cal-CHA, another one's CS-CDA-CIA, if that's not hard enough to remember. Those are the two that we dealt with in this city. There's a third one out there, and I think a fourth one's looking at it. But what they do, these JPAs, they'll go in and make an offer on an existing market rate property, and they're targeting Class A market rate projects, big projects, expensive projects. And what they have the ability to do is issue bonds on the revenue that's being produced by the project. So they'll issue bonds on the projected revenue at the 80 to 120% area median income. So they'll actually issue those bonds. So it's not actually public money is going into these. So it's a pretty interesting model the way they do that. There is some risk to the JPAs. There's some risk to the bond investors. They're not rated bonds. There's some criticism. I read a Forbes article not too long ago. More against the financing than for it. So we looked at all of that. There's no risk to the city because we're not investing any money. We're not the bond investor. And we felt pretty good about the way the reserves, the capital replacement reserves and all those are being funded on these projects. They fund these reserves way more than I can on my projects. But there is some risk. But basically that's what they do. They'll go in, they'll issue bonds after they've agreed to the purchase price. They'll issue the bonds and then they will deed restrict these units to folks earning between 80 and 120% area median income. Their 80 to 120% though isn't my 80 to 120%. It's a little higher than that. They don't discount for utility allowance, things like that. Another thing though too is right now market rate is not at 120%. Most of these happened right during COVID too. So these actually, the ones that were acquired in Glendale happened, the timing was beautiful, right? There's a project that got in a little financial trouble up north, but they did the deal right before COVID and the rents dropped dramatically and they weren't anticipating that, the pro forma didn't anticipate it. We're lucky in that all our deals were post-pandemic, so the rents were already down. But we're not at 120% AMI. It changes from household size, household 1, 2, 3, 4. The delta between market rate rent and the AMI, it's somewhere between 104 to 112%, depending on the household size. So even though they're restricted to 80 to 120% AMI, they can't actually charge 120% AMI because that's not market. So there's that one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is there's really not a whole heck of a lot of cost savings to some households who were, say, renting one of these units at market rate. It gets converted. Now all of a sudden they get to pay it 80%. the delta between what they were paying and what they're paying now, depending on the household size, it could be $80 a month, or it could be $400 a month. It all just depends. You know what I mean? So that's been another kind of folks have kind of complained about the program. You're really not getting that windfall in terms of affordability, but over time they will. Over time, these things are capped at 4%, so the rents cannot go up more than 4% annual. Whereas there's a market rate, there's almost no limit to how much they can go up. So over time, that delta is gonna grow quite a bit. So you got some units, as soon as they converted, there's a pretty good savings. There's other units where the savings wasn't that great, but over time, the savings between what they'll pay here and what they would have paid had it stayed market rate is just gonna grow and grow. So the other really interesting thing about these is after 15 years, the city can exercise its option, a purchase option, and we could take ownership of these. And we could sit there and not take, and hopefully finances work out great. After 30 years, the bonds, in theory, will be paid off. The city gets to take the asset with no out-of-pocket expenses other than transactional costs. So that's pretty appealing too. But what we give up in the meantime is property taxes. The property taxes of these projects would have generated as a market rate deal. We have to forego that. So that's all part of the equation.
That sounds like a great deal.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, great. Who's next?
We've probably been the most active we've ever been in our affordable housing development projects with those three that Mike mentioned. Almost 700 units in development at one time, in construction at one time. And we had planned those to be a little bit one after the other, but all the stars were lined up, the financing was there, they competed in their award categories, they were funded at the state level, and now everyone's very busy. And then on top of that, 1,475 workforce housing units that came online as well. So we weren't planning on having this slide, but we were asked this question as to what, I guess, efforts, if any, is there into developing affordable student housing. And while we've looked at the concept over time, in the past, there is really not a mechanism at the federal or state level to fund these types of projects, student housing. And so we've never been able to put any type of project together in any way, because our financing is only a portion of the entire financing package to develop these projects. But it is something that is being discussed at the state and federal level a little bit more. But one thing that the City Council did do is that last year they allocated some Measure S funding, and they entered into a joint partnership program with Glendale Community College. And similar to the Section 8 program, it's a rental subsidy program for qualifying low-income students who live in Glendale to help pay a portion of their rent over a 12-month period. And it's a program that the city will fund in conjunction with a couple of other programs, the Fresh Success Employment Program that GCC administers to low-income students as well. And so there's all these services that are being provided at the GCC level. They can provide a housing subsidy, and then the City Council expressed an interest in providing a housing subsidy. And so that's why we've paired that program together. So we're about 1 year into it. It's a 3-year program. It's been tough, though, for GCC. They have an enrollment of about 30 students right now. We're expecting higher numbers, but COVID as well took a toll on a lot of the services that GCC offers and a lot of the students as well. And so we're hoping that the student enrollment will pick up, that there'll be activity on campus that will bring them into their programs there, and then we can also add this housing subsidy. So if there are no questions on that, we're now going to get to the planning department, and Eric Kraus will be talking on the next slide.
Not quite as exciting as all the things they're doing, but so we were asked to kind of talk a little bit about the accessory dwelling units that are kind of going on right now, a little bit about landscape ordinance, solar energy, and then parking standards that are currently in the normal zoning code outside of like the affordable realm. So in terms of accessory dwelling units, pursuant to state law, every single family residential development Doesn't have to be a single-family zone. We do have some single-family houses that are in different zones, some multifamily zones, a few of them actually in industrial zones. They're entitled to one ADU and one junior ADU for each one of those single-family residential structures. So in terms of the standards that the state put into place, they're allowed to be up to a height of 16 feet with a minimum 4-foot setback and up to 850 square feet. And that's if they can actually meet all of the zoning standards in terms of lot coverage, landscaping, floor area ratio. If they can't meet those, then they're entitled by state law to get an ADU of to 800 square feet. So that's like the mandated ADU that we have to allow for anyone that's proposing one, even if they don't meet any of our zoning standards. Then they're also entitled to a junior accessory dwelling unit. And the current code, they're required to be within the existing single-family residence, so you couldn't build any new construction or convert a garage or anything like that. And those are limited to 500 square feet in size. So for multifamily residential developed properties, they're entitled to one ADU, and then plus one additional ADU for every 25% of the existing units on site. So if you have like a 10-unit building, then you can get up to 5 dwelling ADUs on that particular property. But at no point are they going to get less than 2. So you get the 1 unit, and then you get 1 additional unit under that whole 25% rule, basically. So, and Miro will talk a little bit more about this. Miro Lotsky is our building official. He'll talk a little bit more about, the energy standards or anything that's required for a lot of our development currently. But ADUs are required to meet the energy and green standards, as well as now under, I guess, the recent changes in the code, they have to provide for photovoltaic solar systems on the building as well. And so we do have park impact fees that are pretty expensive for multi and single family development. So the council did reduce the impact fee for ADUs down to $4,700 instead of per unit, instead of like $21,000, for instance, for a single family. But if your unit is less than 750 square feet or equal to that, then you're exempt from paying the impact fee on that. So currently we have 373 units that have been built that are completely in operation and have the certificate of occupancy. There's quite a few numbers of that we're working on. We got a lot of these during the COVID time. A lot of them got submitted online as we were processing applications that way. So in all, if you look at all the ADUs that are currently either occupied, under construction, in the process of getting permits, it's pretty close to about 980 units currently. Our landscape ordinance, whenever you're doing new landscape on the property, staff always would point the applicant to use the bewaterwise.com website. That has a lot of California native plants, all the drought-tolerant plants that are acceptable under kind of what's the state model water efficiency landscape ordinance, which is better known as WELO. And so any project that's a brand new project that's providing more than 500 square feet of new landscaping has to comply with the new regulations. So all of our new single-family developments, multifamily developments, commercial developments that are providing greater than 500 square feet have to use drought-tolerant landscaping. And then for any project that's rehabilitating more than 2,500 square feet of landscape area also has to meet the MWELO standards. And every year we have to report to the state on the amount of new landscaping that's been done in the city that meets that model ordinance. So that's a yearly reporting that we're required to do. So in terms of solar energy, it's a permitted use in all of our zones. You're allowed to put solar equipment on all the buildings, it doesn't matter what zone it is. Or you can build a freestanding structure, no more than 15 feet in height, and then provide a solar on top of that. We see a lot of that with single-family houses building like trellises or patio covers and then putting solar panels on top of those. So a few of the standards that are kind of been reduced to help with the solar is lot coverage. So our lots coverage standards, you can drop those by 30% and still be considered code compliant, as well as the permanently landscape open space. So you get a 30% reduction from that, and you can exceed lot coverage by 30%. So if you're building on top of a new structure, you're allowed to also go up to 15 feet above that existing structure to allow for new photovoltaic systems, even if the building is currently at its max height under the zoning code. And so I guess the whole idea of the solar farms, we don't necessarily have like solar as a primary use. It's more of an accessory use to like existing structures, existing developed lots. So if someone were to come and like, let's say they wanted to build a solar farm on a single family lot, they have just a ton of space. Is provided that they build a single family house then, and they meet these standards, then there's nothing that would prevent them from actually building a small solar farm on those properties. But you do have to have a primary structure, a primary use that's in place before you'd be allowed to install solar. And we talked a little bit about parking standards for the affordable projects. These are kind of what's in place for our market rate projects.
I have a question on the solar voltaic.
Sure.
So living on a hillside, like in the ordinance, how they have, like there's a nuisance wall or nuisance fence is part of the municipal code. Like you can't put a big ugly fence just to annoy your neighbor. What if somebody decided to annoy their neighbor by putting a 15-foot high solar voltaic thing blocking their view and ruining their property value? Is there anything to limit that?
Yeah, and unfortunately, maybe Jillian can weigh in on this a little bit. The state kind of tied their hands on that whole issue. So essentially, they're not subject to design review, and then the only standards we were able to apply was this 15-foot height rule. So we pretty much don't have a lot of leeway in terms of where and how people are placing this as long as it meets the setback standards.
So there's no like views from neighboring properties?
Nope.
Wow, okay. All right.
I don't know how expensive it is to do that. I wouldn't imagine someone's going to throw a big solar farm in their backyard, but I guess it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. And so our parking does vary per zones, but in terms of multifamily development, in our multifamily zones are our 1650s, 1250s, and our mixed-use zones. A 3-bedroom unit would require 2.5 spaces. 1 and 2 bedrooms require 2 spaces. Then you have a quarter guest requirement. And then our downtown specific plan, we've lowered the parking standards for that area of town because they tend to, it's a little bit more walkable. There's other modes of transportation available. So it's 2 spaces for 2 bedrooms, and then it's 1 for 1 bedrooms and what we call efficiency units. And then you only have to provide 1 guest spaces for 10 dwelling units. And there's also a bicycle parking requirement for a lot of the development in the downtown. They're required to put in bicycle parking. And I'm sure some of that's covered in the building code, but it's also in the zoning code. And so right now the code is really silent on EV spaces. Planning's been reviewed, whatever the building code says is their minimum or whatever people want to put in terms of the volume of EV spaces they want. We're still treating those as actual meeting the code parking spaces. So we're not kind of penalizing anyone for using EV, although our code has a specific standard in there. It says that the spaces have to be accessible, meaning that anybody can use them. So I guess in an EV space, if you don't have an EV car, you can't really park there because you're taking that away from EV charging. So we haven't really enforced that part of it in terms of actually allowing people to put EV chargers in new developments. So one of the things we're looking at right now, we haven't started yet, but we've been asked by City Council to take a look at our multi-family parking standards. So that's one of the things we'll be working on. And then as we move forward with that, then our code will bring that more in line with what the building code requirements are, and then kind of whatever else comes out of that standards, and see how council wants to deal with parking on some of our multifamily development. So that's coming soon.
So that touches on parking minimums, right? Is that what you're alluding to?
That's something that might come up. I mean, it's one of those things we need to study. We provide options to City Council in terms of how they want to start viewing parking for our residential structures.
And
Doesn't the code require that they be EV ready, though?
That is a building code requirement,
Yeah.
and Mr. Lotsky will talk a little bit about that in terms of the volume of spaces that need to be EV ready. So, yeah. So, like I said, we treat those, even though the code technically doesn't allow us to, we treat those as code required parking.
So is that policy discussion around parking requirements, is that limited to the downtown specific zone, or is it for all multifamily?
I believe we're going to
Development.
be looking at all multifamily, because we have had quite a few people coming before city council questioning our parking standards. So
Got it.
We'll definitely be taking a look at that, at least for multifamily zones, and then the mixed use for sure.
Okay, and then I do have questions about EV parking standards. So I'm understanding that there's two different divisions within the planning department that may require EV stalls.
Well, it's two different departments in this community development department. We have planning, then we have building and safety. Building and safety has to comply with, Title 24 energy, green codes, that sort of thing. And I think there's requirements in that building code that say they have to at least provide for it currently. I'm not sure when they're going to move to, you actually have to put them in. But, and then Miro can talk a little bit about this. I know there's one particular parking space that has to be kind of a charging station, but you can't really use it as parking. That's more on the building department side and not planning. So they don't count it as a parking space. So those are the kind of areas we need to kind of work on and try to fix our parking code to try to relate the two different code sections together. So.
Got it. So if as a commission, we wanted to talk to somebody or make a recommendation that new buildings require that 25% of the stalls have EV chargers, who do we talk to? Is it you or is it folks at Building and Safety?
Well, I mean, that would be the commission making a recommendation to the city council, I believe.
Sure.
And then
I
we
guess who would
take
be
it.
exploring that as a policy recommendation to council?
Well, likely, yeah, because those are, some of the things that are kind of like the latest, greatest stuff. So we're going to be taking a look at everything, including the idea of parking maximums even potentially. So.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the last thing that we were asked to take a look at is, all these uses that nobody really seems to like these days. The drive-throughs, the gas stations, the dry cleaners, they're all currently allowed in our zoning code in all of our commercial zones. There's no restrictions on those. I mean, right now, for the downtown specific plan, we got direction from city council to remove drive-throughs from our downtown. So that's going to be going before the city council, and I always get March and May mixed up, May. So we're going to be taking that as some other cleanups for the downtown specific plan to remove drive-throughs from the downtown specific plan, but there's no talks currently about doing that citywide. Gas stations, I don't know when the last one was built. I mean, it's been decades. I mean, they change a little bit. They, put new tanks in, but you see more gas stations going away than you see new gas stations coming in. Dry cleaners, there's, in both, gas stations or dry cleaners are pretty heavily regulated by state regulations, and the fire department keeps a close watch on all these things. They have to keep hazardous materials in check and get permits from fire department, all that sort of thing. So with that, I guess going back to your last question about making changes, recommendations from your commission, that's also, if you wanted some changes in this area as well, then that's something that you would have to present to the city council, and then council gives us direction to then move forward on something like that. So I believe that's it on my end, and now Miro's going to talk about all the fun green building stuff. So.
Can we go
Please.
back to the last slide real
Sure.
quick before we relieve you? So I'm very curious about the drive-through prohibition. I've heard the reasons why we're pursuing this in the downtown area. And in my mind, the same reasons why we would exclude it from the downtown area, we would want to exclude it from anywhere else in the city, including just on the other side of the DSP border, say Glendale Avenue, for example. I know that there was a proposal to put in an establishment wanted to put in a drive-through on Glendale, but on the other side of the DSP, that was going to demolish, I think, 4 small business facilities, including a single-family house, to put in a drive-through. And that would have gone through because it was just outside of the DSP, but it's a very dense neighborhood, also heavily impacted by traffic. And so I'm a little bit perplexed as to why we're limiting the prohibition to the downtown specific plan area and not have it be citywide. So I would like for this to be something that we discuss as a commission, perhaps ideally before it goes to city council, but maybe that's something that we can get agendized for us to make a recommendation to council. Yes. Is your mic on? Sorry.
How's that? Yes,
There.
thank you. I don't have the light, so it's a little bit more difficult for me to see. Chairman Bartrus, members of the commission, one of the concerns with that form of exclusionary zoning is an equal protection claim that they may have, that they're being disallowed from any opportunity to have that use within the city of Glendale. So one of the options there, of course, and the planning would have to examine this, is whether and under what circumstances that use could be appropriately accommodated. So planning will be doing a study and we'll be making recommendations based on that, but there are some additional legal implications to that level of restriction that are of a concern because of equal protection. I just wanted to let you know.
Well, I
Sure.
know the city of San Luis Obispo hasn't allowed drive-throughs in decades, and so it might be worth looking to see what they wrote and see if that's something we could consider.
Yeah, I mean, I brought it up because I have seen other cities go through this exercise, not only for drive-throughs, but for gas stations as well. So if that legal exercise needs to happen, perhaps it can come to our commission for us to consider a citywide prohibition. So is that possible to occur before this goes to council?
For purposes of just an advisory recommendation, but the actual rezoning, or to the extent there's a general plan amendment that might be associated with it because of the governance of districts, or even a specific plan or community plan amendment, since we're in the process of adopting community plans across the city, north, south, east, and west, those would go first to the Planning Commission. They have the jurisdiction in terms of making a recommendation for general plan consistency. But there's nothing preventing those issues to come before this commission for purposes of an advisory opinion.
So is that formally agendized at a future meeting when staff would come back to us and we cast a vote? I just want to make sure we're...
I'm pretty sure Mr. Jones is taking notes, as we do, in terms of items and tracking on agendas and issues that are coming up at the city that this commission has expressed an interest in being involved with or rendering an opinion on. So I think that's the process that would take place here.
Yep.
Yeah, if we need a second to agendize that, I'll second it.
Yeah, and I'll just, I'll say that as an urban planner and somebody who understands the planning field very well, I do expect our commission to lean on the department pretty heavily as we look into the climate adaptation plan and how we can be more sustainable. I know intimately how planning informs what our city is going to look like in the future. So I'm going to be peppering with a lot of questions and figuring out ways to make official recommendations. So that's just one of the ways I plan on doing that, and I encourage the commission to do the same.
Yeah, and real quick, members of the commission, so the housing on it took quite a bit more time. We were short-staffed. That was a little bit of a crazy exercise. But we're going to be working now on our circulation land use elements, so that's an opportunity for your commission to then weigh in on some of those different items as well. So that might be a good opportunity for you then. And I hope you guys aren't anticipating agenda on this and us coming back to you with a full-blown study of these drive-thrus. That's not something we can produce that quickly. So.
No, that's fine. And then, I'm sorry, one more thing, because I know you mentioned landscaping. One of my questions to staff was about the low-impact development ordinance that the city of Los Angeles has. Would this touch on that, or should I be asking other staff about LID in Glendale?
Yeah, LID is actually, and I think Mr. Lotsky can speak to that. I believe it's with Building and Safety now. It used to be Public Works responsibility. I'm not sure if that shifted yet or not, but that definitely comes into play during the plan check process.
Okay, that question's coming.
Question on the previous slide, the landscaping slide. For the rehab projects, existing buildings, is there an incentive for a building owner to retrofit, other than the MWD or Glendale Water and Power incentives? Is there something beyond that?
Not in the planning side. GWP, I believe, has some rebates on turf removal and everything else to put in xeriscape, and that's what they would be getting rewarded for doing
Okay,
that.
so
But-
nothing beyond what MWD and Glendale Water and Power offer?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And it's strictly voluntary. It means they have to come to us and tell us that they want to do this. It's not something that planning is actively out there pursuing.
Okay,
But I think there are some incentive programs that GWP offers
yeah.
to help people
They're
get that direction.
very small incentives. If we need additional people to jump on it, we need to provide them with an additional carrot, because what the current incentives are offered are not moving people enough.
Yeah. Oh, maybe if the water bills keep going up, they might be incentivized.
Water, unfortunately, is cheap.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Lotsky, then he's going to go over all this fun stuff with the building code then. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Listen, this is my first time to be talking before commission, and I'm going to get nervous. That's why I'm going to stand. I'd rather toss you all a bunch of boots and go out in the field, kick some dirt around, and show it to you out there. But I'll try to make building and safety regulations as colorful as possible. So let me take this mask off. So EV charging, EV vehicle charging. Currently, the code cycles require that a single-family residence, when it's built new, that it have a EV charge station ready. Not necessarily that you install that unit, but that it's ready. You've got conduit, you've got electrical, it's accommodated for that. In terms of multifamily, that's also required for 10%. And again, they have to run conduit, they have to run to a specific facility. And then upon the owners or the association or the condominium association decides that they want to install these, it's as easy as possible for them. So now hotels and motels, they also are required. They're based on, I'm going to leave it as a percentage because it's actually a tabulated so many vehicles, this number. And if you like that, I can send you those documents summarizing that. But again, they are dedicated circuits to a specific location. There were some questions about parking and EV. In terms of the building code, an EV space is actually considered a station, not necessarily parking. You come in, you charge, and then you move out, allow someone else to. So something to consider. In terms of a private, you've got a condominium with a dedicated parking space. That's different. That's more like a single family. They can drop in their EV, and it's located specifically to them, not necessarily the entire community. Any common spaces within a multifamily, also there's a requirement that you provide ready facilities. I hope I'm making that clear. And by the way, once you get out of the green code, you go back into the building code, and for every number of EV stations, you have to provide accessibility to those that need extra clearances, spaces, wheelchairs, et cetera. So if it's a private, not necessarily, but if it's a public or a common space, then the building code gets very specific as to the number and then adds requirements for clearances to that space.
If I may interrupt you, EV ready for 10% of the parking. So
Right.
basically, 90% of the residents in the future are going to have to trench to get new conduits to their parking stalls. The problem with that is that even if you put it in shared parking spaces, my experience is that that's a recipe for disaster. I got there first, you have been charging 3 days in a row and I can't charge. Ideally, that minimum number should be 50%. About 5% of the vehicles today on the road are EVs. And if you go to lease or buy a new EV, good luck if you don't already have one because there's a waiting list. They're high demand today. So in the next decade, that number is going to go beyond 10%, especially in California. I think we need to have a realistic number, and that number has to be at least 50%. So we're way off for EV ready. It is my strongest recommendation that we revisit that. It's going to cost significantly more if we try to repair this in the future.
So let me remind you that we are a regulatory division, and as requirements are developed through policies, then building and safety will be obligated to make sure that those requirements are implemented into the building, both at the plan check level when they're drawing up plans, and then in the inspection level when they're actually constructing.
So would this be, in order to fix this, would this be a departmental review, or is this city council would have to say, change your regulations?
Sure. So let me tie in the last question. To whom would you direct a policy change? I would always say go to somebody else. All right. But regardless, what happens is it reverberates through all the division departments.
Yeah.
So, for example, as you bring up parking, it's a planning issue in developing standards in terms of what planning looks for. GWP is going to kick in because now they're obligated to produce an extra amount of energy provide energy for that building. 50% really is going to kick it up, and so there's some challenges. Building and safety will then implement those requirements. Am I forgetting any other divisions that might be kicking into? Okay. Well, so as you direct it to somebody, it's going to one division or department. You're going to get feedback from the entire city. Actually, I hope I'm answering the. You
are. My only concern is that the longer we kick the can down the road and say, we got time, only 10% today, and maybe in a decade we'll go up to 20%. At some point, it's going to be too late. It's going to cost us more and more. And that's, yes, multiple departments and folks have to look at this, but transportation electrification is an inevitability.
I'll just add that I'm glad I'm not working for GWP because that's where the biggest challenges are going to be.
Yep.
And I agree.
So if I may just interject in that, sorry, Commissioner Cartoonian. So as you know, we're reaching out to a consultant to help us with developing building electrification and REACH codes. And one of the things we're going to ask them to look at is EV charging standards. So that's a discussion that we'll have, and the consultant will be coming back to the commission at some point in the future discussing their findings. So it'd be a great opportunity for you to have that discussion with them.
Looking forward to it.
Good.
And I would just say, as we go through this exercise, is that the comments and questions that you may get from us is just maybe consider it a precursor to what we would like to see as part of our climate adaptation plan. So we know this is just an introductory understanding of what you do in your role, and how we can interact in a future policy document, which is going to be the climate action plan. So I know staff is taking notes on these things. We'll get back to you, but there will be a moment where we make a policy recommendation, and just based on the type of questions and comments you're getting, it's probably going to come back, and we're going to expect that as part of a climate action plan. So just so you understand what's happening today.
I perfectly understand, and I want to make it clear, this is not a joke. I actually love working with planning. I actually thought that a thesis, excellent thesis would have been planning regulations compared to crime rate and life. The amount of effort at that point versus first response. So in many ways, you have a colleague in that respect.
Great. And I'll just tack on to what Heike was saying. And to contextualize it a little bit further, it's 10%, what they have is 10% ready. So they could be building a building in theory that has 0 EV chargers, but is able to have 10% at a future date. So it's even more liberal than I think what you're getting at. There should be 2 standards, one that says when the building is built, there are this many EV chargers, and then beyond that, we'll have the 50% that are ready. So just keep that in mind for future discussions. But I wanted to kind of parse out what you said earlier. So you were calling them stations. So the stations that are made available in the building, are they technically not part of the parking? Do they not count as parking stalls as part of the requirements for the building?
So in terms of planning and number of spaces, they will address it in one way. In terms of the building codes, and here's where it becomes very specific. If it's a parking space versus a station, you would count the number of parking spaces, and then from there is the dependence of how many accessible parking spaces you're going to have, how many EV stations are required to be ready. That sounds like a circular, but there are many things in the building code that depends on a parking space, and primarily a lot of it is accessibility. So that's where, depending on which code regulation you're looking at, for what purposes to then follow through on regulations, as in terms of us, what the building codes will require. Did I make that?
No,
No?
that's
Okay.
not totally clear, but I think that's okay. I think what I'll just convey as a concern would be that if we were to require EV chargers in future buildings, that they not inadvertently increase the amount of parking spaces, stations, whatever you want to call them, that we're not inadvertently demanding that we add more parking to that development. So take that back however you will, and however that translates to into policy, but I'm hoping that that doesn't happen if we're requiring more stations, per se.
I think you'll find that in the design process, many of these things can be resolved.
Great. Thank you.
So next slide, please. All right, I've got the, thank you. So we've covered hotel. Can you work the slides for me, please? Next slide. So some of the things that we will enforce is the green code will have a minimum 20% permeability of surfaces. We enforce AQMD regulations today because of air quality. People are not allowed to build a chimney, so we enforce those regulations. Also, as they build, they're required to have stringent VOC materials, and so there's specifications to the builder of what materials and what requirements are for the VOCs. So the paints, the coatings, the carpets, all of this should follow the green building code requirements, and we provide that information to the builder and in plan check, and we also inspect that in the field. Further requirements, there's mandatory indoor water efficiencies. So that's where you've got your 1.28 gallon flush, and I forget the numbers, but all the fixtures. It applies to single family, multifamily, it applies to hotels and motels, it applies to commercial. It applies to new, and it also applies to existing buildings. So if you're remodeling a bathroom, you have to replace that all with new fixtures, and we check for that. Also, construction waste. We have a program where they're required to recycle 65%. We handle that through a debris deposit, and it's something that gets determined during plan check. It's a deposit that they pay, and during the inspection, for them to receive their deposit back, they will show us that they did proper recycling of materials.
Quick question. Oh, okay. I was going to ask about existing buildings, so I'll let you.
I had a question on the waste diversion, on the construction waste. So when you say 65% reduction of the non-hazardous waste, so are you talking about the total of like what's diverted, what's reused, what's donated,
Correct. So,
or sent to a recycling facility and?
yes.
I actually head that up for the building and safety. Hi, I'm Joseph Rodarte. I'm the administrator. Hello? Yep. I do have the light, but didn't seem I could see it. And this is why. So I'm the administrator at the Permit Service Center, and I oversee the recycling debris deposit. And it is collected upfront for every project that has a valuation of over $2,000. So this would entail a substantial amount. The debris deposit goes from $200 all the way to $30,000, one debris deposit per construction project. And as far as the diversion part of that, 65% it's inert and inert material. So concrete, it could be wiring, could be wood, could be dirt, depending on the project. But the materials, they do have to take them to a certified recycling facility, so there's a list that's provided to them, and it's actually on our website, and you'd be able to ensure that you're going to a certified facility for that.
How do you enforce the percentage? How do you know it's actually 65% being recycled?
A good question. And the way that we enforce it is tied to each application is the recycling receipts that need to be provided for that specific construction project. So if I'm going to American Reclamation has a certain percentage that they will write onto their actual receipts, the number of tonnage, the tear weight, the overall weight of the project, and then eventually we get the net weight, and we're able to determine, did you meet that 65% threshold? So there are receipts that are provided. Usually a summary, especially in the larger projects, because there's hundreds of receipts associated with them throughout the project, depending on how long it lasts. But we do a thorough job. We took this over about 2 years ago from Public Works initially, so we handle that specific component of it.
And how do they determine what the deposit is?
It's usually based on 3% for commercial, 2% valuation of the valuation, up to $30,000.
So 3% of the total construction cost?
Of the valuation of that project. That's made by our plan checkers. So when you bring in a project, if I'm building a 20-unit apartment building, there's a valuation that's determined by the plan checker with certain standards. Based upon that valuation, they will take 30% since it's commercial, since it falls underneath commercial, and they would divert that up to $30,000. So the larger projects easily meet that $30,000 deposit.
Valuation specifically very closely correlates the cost of construction.
Okay, and what is like how often do they forfeit that? Like, is the compliance pretty good or?
In the 2 years that I've seen, we've seen roughly a small percentage. We're looking at maybe 2 to 3% that'll forfeit it. We truly try to work with the individuals, the contractors, to ensure that they're meeting, that's the important part of the project, to ensure they're meeting the recycling facility, or recycling. Some of them, it does come with part and parcel for the territory. They will surrender, and we do have some deposits that have been on the books previous to building and safety for a period of time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please stay.
Yes.
So just to reiterate, existing buildings also have similar requirements, including the debris deposit.
Sorry, so the efficiency fixtures I mean, that's not enforced, right?
Pardon me?
Right, that's not enforced, is it? Where,
Oh, yes, it is.
can you explain to me how?
Oh, so let's say you're doing a bathroom remodel. You'll go through various stages of inspection. You'll also do a final inspection. At final inspection, the inspector will check that the fixtures all meet these requirements. It's fairly easy because pretty much everything sold today meets those requirements. But there's a listing and label, and our inspectors are trained to view that.
And so, just so I understand, do fixtures, they do not include like toilets or?
No.
They do?
Toilets, sinks, urinals.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I know there are tons of shower heads that do not, there are rebates that Glendale Water and Power offers for toilets, for example. I know there are things that are sold that are not efficient or most efficient, so.
Yeah, and those are, I believe those are primarily, I've had this home for 40 years. I'm not remodeling, but I'd like to do my part. And so even though I'm not remodeling and there's not that permit triggering a requirement, that's a voluntary measure.
Okay, so for anything that requires pulling a permit, including remodel, you do go in and check for the most efficient
Yes.
fixtures and stuff? Okay, thanks.
So I'd like to cover the solar. Under current code, practically, in all practicality, every new single-family residence, including every new ADU, is required to have a photovoltaic system. It's something that's reviewed by GWP for the criteria for GWP. In the energy analysis, there's a determination, and then we ask that they pull specific permits for that design and have that installed on the building. We understand that in the future codes that's being increased to multifamily and to commercial. However, and I've started reading the new codes, everything is new. In the next few months, we're going to start understanding the new codes, which will start in January of the next year. And as we understand those better, we'll have to be prepared for January 1st, and we can forward that to David and forward to you.
I have a very minor question about the requirement for single family or the ADUs. I've seen an ADU recently that was constructed that happened to be under a very mature shade tree. And I recall the owner grumbling about the city requiring solar panels on a roof that doesn't get much sun coverage. So are there exceptions to the rule that factor in that kind of condition?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
And there's a blurb in the building codes, but that actually gets more effectively taken care of when they're submitting to GWP. GWP actually reviews the
Sun
angles
exposure.
and exposures.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to add that, by the way, I'm old enough to where I did energy calculations by hand because there was no programming. That was in the early 80s. And things have grown, and now we've got some sophisticated software. So I just want to make a comment that the state, every code cycle has worked towards increasing the energy conservation. And for single family, they've kind of reached their goals, and now it appears that they're moving into a more cleaner energy. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in these terms, building and safety follows what the state requirements are. All the state codes are common to all jurisdictions within the state. We have to comply with those minimum. There are places where we can adjust for geologic, for topographic, but in general, we are required to follow the state and therefore follow the state's goals for energy and green as well. In summary, The zero net energy for all new residential, the goal was to be met in 2020. For commercial, it's 2030. For retrofitting, there's a 2030 set for retrofitting. So I imagine that's going to be, I want to remodel my building, and therefore I'm going to have to increase my energy efficiencies. Currently, we're under the 2019 California Building Code. I'm going to confuse you a little bit, which is generated from the 2018 Model Code put together by the International Code Council. California basically takes that code and doubles the size to incorporate all the requirements. I'm proud to say that I'm in a state that leads the nation and the world in terms of energy and green. We're going to go into a new code cycle in January 1st of 2023. We're setting up a team to start analyzing and preparing that for code adoption. And January 1st will be the date of implementation. So we've got our hands cut out for us. Some of the things that we understand is encourage efficiencies in electric heat pump, because that's the new technology for cleaner energy. There's going to be requirements for electric ready requirements, for increase in electric ready requirements for new homes, expansion for the solar voltaic and battery storage standards, batteries as well, strengthened ventilation, there's other standards. So when you read the code, it doesn't necessarily say this building has to have solar systems on top. What it is, it's buried into the analysis. What we found in current codes, if an individual wanted to design a building without a solar system on top of their new building, they're probably going to have walls this thick, they're going to have insulation 70 inches thick, and it's just very difficult. So effectively, this is how the codes inspire individuals to go with the photovoltaic. And to understand, when requirements are placed in, they need to be incorporated as an engineering design so that everything works together. So if you've got a Toyota and you've got a Ford engine that you want to drop in, it's a complete design. And so many of these things are incorporated in such a way so it forces the designer, the energy designer in this instance, to incorporate it in such a manner that affects everything positively. And as we increase the requirements, the state also reviews and wants documentation that it's efficient and also works with and not against energy conservation. And I'll give you an example. Cool roofs. Well, they're great in certain climates. In other climates, they reverse. They're actually working negatively, and they're actually extracting the energies. And we're talking about north, so we don't see that too much here. But so there's a little bit of engineering that needs to be done with that, and we hope that the REACH Codes consultants will be helping us with that. That concludes my portion, and I'll run away before you guys ask any more questions.
No, if anything, you mentioned earlier that you were nervous about your presentation. I think you're a pro at this.
I'm still nervous.
If anything, you should do this more often.
I want to take my coat off and my tie and hang myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. I'm sorry, there's one more slide, and I'm going to turn this over to Joseph. He's going to discuss a little bit about what building and safety is all about.
So, hi, Commissioner Trinian. The Commission asked regarding the Permit Service Center and some of the functionality of what happened during COVID. What are we going to be retaining? So let me rewind a little bit. Back in 2020 of March. Back again. Back in 2020 of March, we had to pivot from in-person experience, as everyone did, shutting our doors, working remotely for about a week, and then having to come forth with develop some sort of plan or implement some sort of strategy where we would have a paperless project submission. try to retain some of the actual functionality of how we had it and see if we were able to still process applications, do plan check, and everything else that we were previously providing of services to the community, to the development community, to our residents and such. Previous to this, we had a trend analysis of showing that, we did a high volume of commercial projects. We were building up on the residential coming up to this point. What we didn't anticipate was that we thought that individuals would cease maybe some development in that respect. On the other hand, what ended up happening is they decided to kick it into overdrive. So the projects were now more residential, less commercial. ADUs that really have taken on, as my colleagues had spoken to, and that really added to what we needed to develop a better system. We previously had gone out for an RFP for a new land management system that would integrate everything into a virtual environment. This kind of expedited. So a lot of the good that's being done because of this COVID period has now built some goodwill with everyone coming online for a virtual environment that we're hoping to launch at some point during the summer. This review and permit issuance to be enhanced and formalized later this year with the new land management system will provide that opportunity for everyone to submit online, virtually, because we found out that once we were able to go from 7 to 12 is what we were originally open, we now were open 24 hours for submissions. People's preferable way of communication was now email as opposed to a phone call. I don't know about you, but drafting up an email and trying to explain code is not an easy thing to do in an email. So what they ended up doing is these land management system will now be able to integrate virtual meetings on simultaneously being able to do a plan check over that, which will enhance the ability. Paper plans that used to be transferred from planning to GWP to building and safety will now be concurrently disseminated for everybody to review at that particular time. So these enhancements that, there was some negative consequences, obviously, to COVID, but some of the enhancements that come out of it, some of the positives that we're being able to develop over this is being able to enhance our services. It also will provide the permanent records of being 100% digital, which will be more accessible, more transparent to the public. They'll be able to be more robust in their reporting, what they're looking for. We find that a lot of the same repetitive questions of how many permits, or where can I find my status of my plan check? These will then be going away. You will literally have a database, or a dashboard, thank you for the word, a dashboard where you'll be able to go ahead and see how many permits are outstanding, where your plan check status, exactly which department is reviewing it. So these two will be the enhancements. And last but not least, we found that individuals love not coming into the permit service center. One of the reasons was to pay, and now they'll be able to do that over, at some point, it used to be on phone, on an analog phone for security purposes, but they'll be able to do it via the internet.
I have a question on that. So when they put the public notices out for design review and so on, and they say the documents will be available at planning and so on, so does that mean that if I want to know about some project that I could go online instead and see the drawings there without having to come into the planning office?
The drawings are not, they're proprietary property. So anything, I would ask that question of my planning associates, and they deal, since they deal with the DRB and what they're allowed to make available to the public. But for building and safety, our records, they're proprietary of the designer, architect, and such. You're more than welcome to come on in and look at the plans, but it would require the authorization of those individuals to release them to you. If you're looking for the design review, postings, and all that information, I would divert to Julian for those types of questions. But as far as for planning and the DRB, I would ask Eric or Kristen to answer that question.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, and Eric can chime in as well, but Joseph is absolutely right. We have copyright protections that we have to respect with respect to architectural plans, and so with the written permission. However, in terms of applications that are made with DRB plans, those are packages that are typically posted online, and anyone who is interested in that item can take a look at what those applications are. But go ahead, Eric.
That's correct. So that process will continue the same. Posting before hearings and stuff like that, that'll still be happening. The way the LMS system works, unless you actually are attached through an email to a particular project, then you can't look at everyone else's projects. You have to actually be the one that ended up submitting that project or have access through an email that's registered through the system.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
would
it's
be
just,
before it's published for public
right.
review.
Right, okay. Yeah, just one of my constant sources of frustration is when the public notice comes out, like, oh, there's this project, and I think, oh, what's that? And, that's, near me and so on, and I click on the link, there's nothing there, and so they wait until like the last minute, legally required before the actual meeting to put it on there, and so that means that the person has to somehow put it on their calendar or something to remember to keep checking to see when it's finally posted. So it sure would be
Commissioner.
nice if the package was ready at the same time so that when the interested people look at it, that they could click and something would be there.
Yeah, and so that's something that I personally am working very hard on. I'm actually part of the project team implementing this LMS system, the land management software. So I'm trying to hold staff a lot more accountable for making sure that they're really ready to get to that hearing before they actually get there. So the beauty about the LMS system is it's, unless you hit a certain step in the process of your review, and all planning applications are going through the same process that building and safety would, so that's all going to be on the system as well. It won't allow you to actually schedule a hearing until you have your staff report done and you have those plans in hand. So we're trying to prevent that sort of thing coming where everything's last minute all the time. And so when you have your stuff ready and your staff report's done, it's approved by your supervisor, now you can post that stuff online. So we're trying to move in that direction. And we have a lot of new staff members right now, and so that's how we're going to train them up. So.
Right, that's wonderful news. That's best news I've heard in a long time, actually.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much to planning staff. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to the next item.
Next item on the agenda, item number 4, all communications. Discussion is limited to items within the jurisdiction of the Sustainability Commission. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Sustainability Commission members may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff for investigation and report. Chair, I do not have any callers at this time. Item number 5, action items. 5A, selection of ex officio student non-voting members for the Sustainability Commission. 5A1, motion of selecting 2 voting members of the commission to serve as an ad hoc student member selection committee to conduct the screening and selecting qualified candidates for interviews, and the application period closed June 17, 2022. Mr. Jones.
I just needed to stand for a while. You have a presentation, please, Brad? So yes, we've come round, believe it or not, so quickly to that time of year when we're going to have to select our new ex officio members to replace the 2 brilliant members we have now. So we're going to try and change it up a little bit, and we're also going to ask for an extension because we're a little bit behind. In the motion that was passed, developing the Sustainability Commission said that student members would need to be selected, or the selection process and screening process would need to close in May. So we're asking that we can close that in June 17th. We don't think that extra month is going to inhibit the system too much. So in the motion, we would like the commissioners to approve that.
I'd like to move that we extend the close to June 17th. I remember last time we felt a little rushed, trying to do that by May. And I think that helps with you can capture students maybe that are out of school, for the year also, but at least communicating while they're still in school and easier to reach. So like they're done with finals and everything, and then they can focus on this. So it makes sense.
And we hope to have I'll talk about a little bit more robust outreach system, so that extra time, hopefully we can get more students interested. So just a reminder for students who will be or wanting to become an ex officio officer, there's certain qualification requirements that must be met. At least one of the members must reside in the city of Glendale. At least one of the members must be attending high school or higher education facility within the city of Glendale. And members must have obtained at least junior standing at high school. And the members must have some knowledge of sustainability and environmental sciences and be willing to participate in the commission for a year's term. And just a reminder, the ex officio term commences August 1st and terminates July 31st of the following year. This year, we're really going to focus on expanding and doing a lot more outreach than we did last year. Even though we've got two excellent ex officio members, we're going to make sure there's an opportunity for anybody who is interested to be part of this program going forward. So with that said, we're going to update the Sustainability Commission page to include the application and information. We're going to create a news release for the Glendale website. After Commission approved the new deadline, we're going to include a flyer for recruitment. We're also going to promote the opportunity on the sustainability newsletter, email, and through Glendale Connect. And with our new sustainability associate, Elizabeth, she's going to make sure that we do it across all social media channels to, as I say again, reach as many people as we can about the opportunity. As was discussed at a previous commission meeting, we're going to work with the commissioners to reach out to all the high schools in Glendale. Each commissioner will be connected with a high school and be able to promote the opportunity within that high school. And the current ex officios, we're going to ask them to reach out to their schools to make sure that the opportunity is known in their places of where they're currently studying. And we're also going to work with organizations such as Glendale Environmental Commission, Glendale Youth Association, to make sure that through their mailing list and everything, that this outreach goes to as many people as possible. So we've developed this new poster, which we think is inviting, and we do like it because it represents all the gamut of the different populations within the Glendale, and we think it's a very inclusive poster. So we worked with our department on that, so we hopefully to get that out soon. And regards to timeline, as mentioned, so April, May, we'll be promoting the opportunity. The application closes June 17th. Through June 17th through July 1st, we anticipate having candidate interviews. And at the July 7th Sustainability Commission meeting, the ad hoc committee, if the commission chooses to have an ad hoc committee, would announce successful candidates. And then the successful candidates will be sworn in on August 1st. So they'll be available for the first commission meeting in August. So the motion before you is to, if the commission wants, to set up a new ad hoc committee to select the students and again, move the closing application date to June 17th.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Just a question for David. So at some point, the commissioners that were assigned a different school will get a copy of the flyer and the application so that we can follow up with the schools? Is that
Yes,
what it
correct.
is?
So if you have a school that you'd like to work with, let me know, and then the schools that aren't picked will be assigned to the different commission.
I think last time we each picked a school. Am I incorrect?
Yeah, I think the chair proposed Magnet, the Magnet High School, and
Yes,
can't
please.
remember.
Glendale High,
Glendale.
my alma mater.
I had, since we're changing this up a little bit, I was just looking at the flyer and also the application, and a couple of places, like the flyer, I think it's fine for the flyer to say 2 letters of recommendation because, you know, you don't want to put too much text on there, but in the actual application, and I worked on that, so I don't know why I didn't notice this before, but the letters of recommendation, there should be something on there that says that the recommendation should come from, you know, a school teacher, counselor, or their supervisor at a nonprofit, something like that. I'm on other committees, and we have gotten, like, I remember a student for a scholarship applicant, just had like a buddy do a letter of recommendation. I mean, just need to define it a little bit more, that it shouldn't come from your mom or something like that, or your best friend or your uncle or something, that it needs to be, I mean, it seems obvious to us, but that's I guess the interpretation could be different. And so, and also the flyer, that website, is that just a placeholder for the website? Because there's no website. When I looked under sustainability-commission.gov, nothing came up. So
Correct.
no, so that's just a placeholder. Okay. And but it would be great if they can just complete it online, and it kind of goes through. But what else? Yeah, I think the rest of it. Oh, and the flyer had mentioned, it says apply if you are, and then it says interested in environmental issues. The requirement includes having some background or knowledge of environmental issues, so maybe that could say, have an interest and a background in environmental issues, just to make it a little more consistent with what the actual criteria are.
Yep. Can make that edit.
If I may ask a question to my colleague, do they really need to have a background in environmental issues? If it's a student that they're an English major, but they're interested in the environment, but not have a background in the environment, would that discourage some students from applying? Should we be a little bit more inclusive and say, as long as you're interested in sustainability and environment, apply, not necessarily a background?
How about something like involved in environmental issues, or involved in something along those lines? Not necessarily a background, because it's kind of difficult for a 16 or 17-year-old to have that, but.
So that means we would also have to change the text in the guideline, so if we're going to take it out of, the flyer, we need to take it out of the other one, because otherwise.
I think the word
they won't
background,
qualify.
I guarantee you at 16, 17, I did not have a background in environmental issues, unless the environment involved cars that drove fast. But that discourages some students from applying, just because they haven't taken a class in one thing or another. Even though if the application comes to us, I don't think we'll exclude them, but it might inadvertently, discourage someone. I just don't.
So in the resolution, the language reads, student ex officio members shall have some knowledge of sustainability, environmental sciences, and a willingness to participate in and constantly serve on the commission for a one-year term. So I think we can work with that.
Yeah, so are we talking about removing that language then, or just saying interested in, so it's consistent from the flyer to the
Yeah, we can make the language
policy?
consistent.
Okay.
I'm okay with having it vague. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine too. I just, it was different in both places, and just wanted it to be the same, whichever
Thank you for
whichever way we're
noticing.
going. But yeah, and I just hate to have someone take all that time to fill out everything, and it turns out, oh well, you're not actually eligible. But anyway, because they're going to see the flyer, they're not going to see the text probably. But so so that was it for me, and I know a couple of commissioners mentioned an interest in serving on the committee. Two of us already got to do that. Commissioner Conjane and I already did it, but I'm happy to nominate the two of you if you're interested.
I'm available.
I believe Commissioner Pinkerton had shown an interest as well, hadn't she, last year or recently?
I'm okay with not participating if there are people that actively want to do it. So you don't have to put me in just because I didn't do it last time.
Well, you were interested last time too, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'm unfortunately Jennifer's not here to speak for herself, but I don't have to be on the committee, the subcommittee. Are there people that actively, like, are there people that want to be on the committee? If so, speak up.
I like interviewing people and getting to know other students. So if you guys are looking for one of us to participate as well, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea, having,
Yeah, I think it'd be very
Someone who's in it.
beneficial to have one of the current ex
I think that
officios.
would be, as long as they're, not precluded from interviewing, I think that would be a great idea. If you can interview the next ex officio members, you along with, I don't know if Commissioner Pinkerton had an interest.
We
the
don't
motion in front of
specify
you.
whether it be a voting or non-voting member, so it's certainly open to our current ex officio members who would be interested in serving on the ad hoc committee.
well, just like on the Earth Day, you know, we had a student member and 2 voting commissioners, so that model seemed to work pretty well, so.
Great idea.
And the ad hoc have 1 ex officio and 2 commissioners, or is it limited to the number 2 no matter what?
We've set it up as 2 commission members, but you can certainly expand that commission. It's really within your purview.
Yeah, it's the same as what we did for. Earth
Or
Day.
not have a commission, an
Commissioners.
ad hoc committee, and all serve in the capacity of the review. So you have latitude.
And we have to decide in this moment which commissioners would be on the committee?
No, you don't. You don't
Oh,
have to
okay.
pass all of this motion. You could just adopt that portion, extending the period of time, and you could wait for Commissioner Pinkerton to come back to provide
Or
any other
could-
direction.
Or just so we don't have to revisit this, could we just say, you know, Pinkerton and you, right? Commissioner Cartoonian, and then if she doesn't want to serve that,
Exactly, we can
Chair-
put her down as a primary, and if she's not available or she doesn't want to do it, I'll be more than happy to step in along with our ex officio member.
right. So we should have 2 voting members, so you could do it either way, so if you want to do it.
We don't have to have myself and Commissioner Pinkerton. It can be just Commissioner Pinkerton and the ex officio member, or myself and the ex officio member. But I would defer to my colleague as the primary choice, and if she's not available, I'll step in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're looking to have 2 voting members, not just either or, so.
I think the
Plus the student.
clarification was that it's 2 members total, period, unless we decide to change it.
That's the way we've set up the motion,
Correct.
because that was the structure we had established last year,
Yep.
was a selection of 2 commission members. We obviously didn't have ex officio members at
Correct.
that time, but it's not limited to a voting or a non-voting member
Correct,
of the
correct.
commission.
Because
So-
they're going to come up with a recommendation that's going to come to the full commission anyways.
That's correct.
They're not making the final decision, they're bringing a recommendation.
Right, but just as we had the Earth Day, had 2 voting members plus a student, and we're changing the rules right now, the policy is changing right now, can we say up to 2, just clarify 2 voting members and a student ex officio?
You could offer a substitute motion. This is the motion that we've drafted, so you can offer an alternate motion and make your recommendations and see how that pans out on a vote.
I mean, it's really up to you.
Yeah,
It's
it
if
is,
you're-
indeed.
It's not, it's what we want it to be. So if you want to be a second, if you want to be one of the 3, we can change it.
Not necessarily.
Okay, so then
I'll
let's,
defer to my colleague,
yeah,
Commissioner Pinkerton, and if she's not available, I'll step in for her.
okay, let's proceed
So
with that.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
Does anybody have any objection to that? Okay,
You want to make a motion that summarizes the direction that you want to take
yeah,
the
I'll make
selections?
I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Okay, roll call?
Commissioner Cartoonian,
Yes.
Commissioner Khanjan,
Yes.
Commissioner Pinkerton, Vice Chair Werner,
Yes.
Chair Bartusov.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so to be clear, because this was a sort of a broad-ranging discussion. The appointment is for Commissioner Pinkerton, and if Commissioner Pinkerton is not available, then Commissioner Cartoonian would serve, and our ex officio would be a member of the ad hoc committee for selection. Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you. So do we officially have our ex officio members for another month?
July 31st.
July 31st.
Until others are decided on. Okay, got it.
Did we already, we didn't
Your
move
mic?
yet to
Your mic?
extend the deadline?
Your
Oh,
mic?
sorry, we didn't move yet to extend the deadline, did we?
Oh, right, no.
Oh.
Need to have a motion to extend the deadline to June 17th.
Yeah,
Okay.
I had already moved that
Okay.
That was
earlier,
in
but
fact part of
yeah.
the written
was part of it.
motion, so,
It was a 2-in-1.
yes, that was discussed and that was part of the direction that I heard. Yeah, even though I didn't repeat it when, when I was summarizing what you just did, so.
Okay. All right, great. Next item?
Next on the agenda, 7, Sustainability Office Update, 7A, Update Climate Action and Adaptation Plan.
So yeah, happy to let the commissioners know that the RFP should be released within the next 10 days for the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. So we're going to give responders 30 days to respond to that and then go through the selection process after that.
that was 10 days, you said?
Going to be released within 10 days,
Yeah, it's
yes.
being released in 10
Yeah.
days for a 30-day comment, yeah, okay.
We're also pleased to announce, in light of the discussion earlier on today with community development, that we're in the process of developing the contract to hire the consultant to work on the REACH code. So that should be happening fairly soon. And speaking to consultants, it should be a 6-month process all in all to get that whole thing done, which works well with what Miro was talking about in terms of getting ready for the 2023 Cal Green Code. So everything should coincide nicely with that. And then finally, Earth Day.
7C, Earth Day.
You have the flyer. So Elizabeth has done a tremendous amount of work on this, and it's just a shame she's not here for us to acknowledge that. She had to go to Belgium for a wedding. But basically, without her work, when she's done hours and hours a day on this, we wouldn't have had anything as extensive as what she has put together. So as you can see, the location is going to be at ArcSug, which we think is a really good location for the vendors. And if you scroll down to the next. So she put together a vendor map and everything. She's recruited up to 30 different people or vendors to come to the event. So that is like Glendale Environmental Coalition, the Sierra Club, food vendors, et cetera, et cetera. So she's worked really, really hard on getting all those people together. So I think it's going to be a fantastic event. At some of the previous events that we've been tabling at recently, people have been asking about it, so we think the turnout's going to be high. We sent information out today to the Sierra Club and asked them to advertise the event on their contact lists and everything. So we do expect a really good turnout for this first event. We're really excited and really proud of the work that Elizabeth has done to get this up and running. And just the amount of permitting she's had to go through has been insane with LA County for the food vendors. And we just got a call the other day saying they couldn't permit one food vendor because she didn't have a cater at home permit. So anyway, but it's been a lot more work than I would have ever done. So we just need to thank Elizabeth. Let me see her next time. And that's that.
David, I remember last time we had talked about promoting the event. When do you think we'll have like an electronic flyer that we can distribute to the public?
On Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
okay, great. Perfect, great, very exciting.
The permit for this event was issued today by me.
Thank you,
So we know it happened.
You know who to reach out if you need permit.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So I did have a quick question. So if we wanted to agendize the drive-through discussion, how, do I do that here now verbally and get a second? Okay. So I do want to have the commission discuss that drive-through discussion. And I know that gas stations are not, it's not a common or frequent occurrence that we get a permit for gas stations, but I have seen other cities pursue that as a policy. So I would like to have those two items brought to the commission for us to make a recommendation to council.
Second.
So I'll have to reach out to staff and community development, see what their timelines and everything, the workloads, and get that information. Then I'll come back to the chair and then we'll talk about the month to agendize that. So
Great.
it's not going to be next month.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Anybody else before we adjourn? All right. Motion to adjourn.
Second? Oh.
And we're adjourned at 7:32 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.